Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today, I have a special guest, Dr. Talya Miron-Shatz. She's an expert on medical decision making. She's been trained at Princeton with Nobel Prize laureate Daniel Kahneman. She's a visiting professor at Wharton School of Business, visiting
I was.
researcher.
I was a lecturer at Wharton.
You are right. Great. Visiting lecturer at Wharton, and also visiting researcher at Cambridge.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Yes. And she is an organizational psychologist, behavioral economist. She has a new book called Your Life Depends on It, what you can do to make better choices about your health.
Ta-da!
So, yes. Talya, congratulations, first of all, on your book. You
Thank you.
just released it, just published it on September 28th, I believe, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Yes, and I know that it's such a relevant topic today for all of us, regardless of whether or not we are experienced in healthcare or we are healthcare professionals, providers. We are all patients at one point or another, and the information travels so quickly, probably faster than ever before in our age today. So making these medical decisions has so many implications, and patients are also playing an important role, not just healthcare providers, correct?
Absolutely.
What prompted you to what prompted you to write this book
I
today?
want to take a step back, and then I'll tell you what prompted me. So you talk about patients, but the truth is that COVID just landed medical decision-making in the center, front and center of our lives, and we're all making medical decisions practically all the time, to mask or not to mask, to sanitize our hands or not, to vaccinate or not, to get the booster shot or not, constantly. So you really don't have to be a patient to make medical decisions.
Yeah. That's a great point. And, I think that the information that is surfacing online that is now playing an important role in those decisions. Since the last time we spoke, I know you were a guest on the All Out Coach podcast. I had a chance to serve as one of the panelists on a webinar that explored the role of medical education delivered via social media on patient outcomes, on behaviors. And so there's been many different, success stories of medical education delivered virtually, surgical techniques, complex surgical techniques for emergency medicine physicians. But also, we cited a study, a dermatology hashtag study, that found that only 5% of all dermatology-related hashtags are authored by board-certified dermatologists. So you're left with a lot of patients out there who are on Instagram, who are on social media, making decisions based on information that they may or may not be trained to make it, to decide on. So what are some of those factors that you think that you address in the book, or on how to make better decisions in this age of information for patients? Let's start with a patient's perspective, maybe.
Absolutely. Because, you started with physicians and you talked about emergency doctors getting trained, and that's great. If you're an emergency doctor and you're receiving credible information and you're being trained, fantastic. If you're a patient and you're reading something online, now that something might be another patient's experience, and sometimes it's incredibly valuable, but sometimes it's just opinions, rumors, fears, scares that people are sending out there, sometimes their own, sometimes they seek to be influencers. And, we are influenced by simple messages. I think every American knows that by now. We have two ways of thinking. We have system one. It's like, quick, what do you want? What can I get you? Which sandwich? Boom. You decide, like tuna. Okay, that was really fast, right? You didn't say, well, let me weigh the options. What's the evidence? How much protein? No. You're like, snap. Yeah. I'm going to decide. Why? I feel like tuna. Okay, that's great. When you're deciding on a sandwich. What happens when you need to decide on surgery, on medication, on dermatology? You have a rash. What should you do? Should you go see a dermatologist? Should you just, maybe your neighbor says, oh, if you rinse it with lemon, it's really great. Or I don't even want to come up with any wacky examples, because who knows what people are going to do with that. So what you need to do is you need to use system 2. That's a slower system. That's the evidence-based system. It takes more time to process. It takes more information. We'll get to information in a minute. Stay tuned. And it's hard. It's just really hard. What do? System 1, snap. Someone says, I have a great solution. They look like they have fantastic authority. They're like, I know, I have all the answers. And you're like, yes, this is great. I want someone who has all the answers. But the truth is that nobody has all the answers. And I think COVID, again, just emphasized that, because it's a moving target. When it started less than 2 years ago, nobody knew what it was. We didn't know. We didn't have vaccinations. We didn't know how we would respond to them. So there's a lot of uncertainty. We don't like uncertainty. We like answers. We like it simple. And guess what? When reality is complicated, then we still like it to be simple. So we go with whoever gives us simple answers. And they may be wrong. But that's just one way that we're wired. And then someone's feeding us information, sometimes really innocently. And sometimes people want to influence us, to impact us, to gain political power of various sources. And I wrote a blog. I write for Psychology Today. I wrote a column, and I called it "Get Your Politics Out of My Pandemic," because really, I think it's not helping anyone. So we're sometimes fed this type of information, and then it's really hard to say, wait a minute, is this credible? Is this for real? Where's the evidence? I'm not sure. And that's a major challenge. That's a challenge for us as patients, as people. We want to be healthy. No one will say, oh, Tim, I really want to be unhealthy. Who's going to say that, right? Our goal is to be healthy.
And nowadays, it wasn't just the patients. I think a lot of the healthcare prescribers and professionals, they're left wondering and questioning whether or not, this information is credible. What were the methods? What were the statistical methods used to make these conclusions? And how can I apply that to clinical practice in order to understand when do I need to treat? Who is going to have those severe symptoms, and and how to triage care when you have so many testing. Is a negative test for COVID really negative? And when so many questions that that forced people to search the information everywhere online. And you mentioned about the information, and there's also the misinformation out there. I saw a film, A Social Dilemma, that Jonah Sachs, who's a recent guest also on the All Out Coach podcast. He's the author of the book Unsafe Thinking, and he reminded me about the movie, and I hadn't seen it. I watched it, and I learned from a lot of the executives from all the leading social media platforms, who talked about how they showed data that the false information travels 6 times faster than true information online.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. I'll tell you why. Quick, easy, simple. That's tempting. And that's the kind of information, when you're spreading around fake news, that's the kind of information you're spreading.
Yeah.
Real information is heavy. It travels slowly. It's harder for us to process. It's harder for you to tell your neighbor, as you're mowing the lawn or walking past them, walking the dog. It takes more than 2 seconds. So it travels. It travels more slowly.
What are some of the tips or some of the suggestions you have in your book or in general to patients? How do they adapt that slower thinking and maybe become more health literate, since that's a problem, right?
It is a problem. I think as people, we need to be aware of our tendency to just believe the snappy, quick thing that we're told that's associated with emotion. We need to say, stop, wait a minute. How do I know this is true? What kind of evidence? Where is this coming from? Why is this person telling me that? Oh my God, it's based on a study with 30,000 people. That's great. Or it's based on my neighbor's experience or what they heard as they were doing their hair. Interesting. Maybe not quite so credible. But I also have great advice for communicators, and that is to fight fake news with its own tools. What does that mean? So people are tempted by information that's easy to process. Give people true information that is easy to process. So I said, real information is heavy. It's slow to travel. Feed it in sound bites. Make it simpler. Think about us, the audience, everyone who's tuned in now, as if we were fifth graders. And don't be insulted, anyone, please. I'm not insulting you. I'm just saying 90 million Americans have low health literacy. They can't help it, and they still deserve to be healthy. And all of us, the smartest, brightest, most educated, you said, I taught at Wharton, I was at Princeton, I'm at Cambridge. Amazing, right? When I'm sick, when I'm in pain, I had a pain in my toe. It's a tiny little thing. I'm like, oh my God, it hurts. That's all I could think of. It takes away part of your cognitive abilities. When you're scared, likewise. When your doctor says things you don't understand, and that happens a lot. I spoke today with someone, I was interviewed for another podcast, and the lady said she had a problem with her eye, and they told her, a specialist told her she has to go to a subspecialist and orbit specialist. What's an orbit specialist? Who knew there was an orbit specialist? So again, she's not a fifth grader, but someone had to translate this for her and say an orbit specialist is someone who deals with the rotation of your eye, just translate it. So if you're a communicator, if you, if you work for the US government or the FDA or the CDC or a clinic or a healthcare system, please remember, you're talking to smart patients who care about their health, and you should talk to them as if they were fifth graders, and then add information that relates to them as adults, as professionals, everything they could drill down to. But don't say you need to go see an orbit doctor, because what they'll say is, huh? What? What did you say? So predict that, anticipate that, and talk about it, and add some information that has an emotional component, especially when you're trying to drive people to action. That's really good advice. For communicators. For us, just laymen, it's a bit harder sometimes. It's really hard because we're attacked with all this information that's simple and just glints at us and tells us, do this, do that. And we need to resist that temptation to go with it.
Yes. So there, you can hear me, right?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Just checking. Had some audio issues. So so they become healthcare consumers. You refer to them as healthcare consumers as well.
They do.
Patients, right? So they are not they're not often literate, right, in terms of health literacy. Yet they're put in positions where they have to make important decisions about their life, about their health. So, what do you mean by healthcare consumers? Because I know you shared some striking data about how patients demand particular treatments and how they consume medication, which was for me striking, and I shared it with a lot of my colleagues. So what do we mean by health? What do you mean by healthcare consumers, and how do patients really demand treatments in the real world today?
So I think it's very tricky. I think when you go to a cafe, you can say, I want an extra shot of espresso. I want this on the side, whatever. You're a consumer. That's great. Why is it great? Because, why not? And it's fun. And you're basing your choices off of your experience. You like more ice cream, you like more milk, etc. You have knowledge. When you're a healthcare consumer, you're in a tricky position. Your health is at stake, not your coffee. Really, your health, your leg, your eye, your digestive system. These are heavy matters where you should make informed choices, and not a lot about these matters. So by healthcare consumers, I mean we're given the power to choose. And on the face of it, that's great because we can choose coffee, so why can't we choose healthcare? For the reasons I just stated. And the scarier part for me is our interaction with our doctors. So we like to think of our doctors as people who just want our health and what's best for us. For the most part, it's true, but they work under constraints. So a large amount of a huge proportion of doctors say that they overprescribe, be it medication, be it treatments, even procedures. Why do they do that? A major reason is demand from consumers. And a consumer can say, consumer, it's ridiculous. I keep saying consumer. As a consumer, you can say, well, yeah, the customer is always right. But is the customer always right when they say, I want to get an MRI? Like, really? Is that the best thing for them? If the best treatment is like a wait and see that the doctor thinks is the best thing, is it really the best thing if we're subjecting the patient now to MRI just because they say, I want that? So that's a major reason for overtreating. Another major reason is, and that's the dark side of consumerism, is doctors make money off of it. Yeah. Doctors make money. That's the reality, but also it's scary. For me, it's really scary. I would like the doctor to say to me, Dr. Miron-Shatz, I want you to do A, B, and C, and I don't want to see dollar signs in their eye. I don't want to start thinking about how much are they making off of the C. Maybe the C is redundant. Maybe they're just giving it to me because they're going to make a buck off of it. And that really legitimately is a reason for their prescribing. Not everyone, not all the time, but they do admit that this happens. And the third reason, which isn't great either, is fear of lawsuit. So basically, those like, I don't really think you need the C. It's totally redundant, but what the heck? Let me prescribe it to you because if not, you might complain and sue me. So this shows that to be a healthcare consumer is to live a very complicated life. It really is. Like, you can't just say, whatever, it's going to be fine. I don't know that it's going to be fine, and I don't know that we have the information. So what I try to do in the book is not just to depress everyone about healthcare choices, is also to give some tools. Is to give tools for people on both sides. So when you're asking for things, do you really know what they entail? Do you know the benefits? And do you know how many people will benefit? Because if this MRI you're so keen on getting will really benefit maybe 1% of patients, and it's just a very unpleasant procedure, then maybe you don't need to take that. That's just one side of coming and demanding in an informed way, not just saying, I deserve this. I pay health insurance. I deserve, I'm a consumer, give it to me. Your goal really is to be healthy. That should be your ultimate goal, not to receive as much healthcare as possible. So one aspect of it is to ask for things that will benefit you. Mm-hmm. Another aspect is to be inquisitive about things that you're being offered. And how do we do that? So for things that you're offered, I offer a set of questions. And I really think we need to train ourselves as patients to be good consumers, to be in charge of what we're doing. One set of questions that I really like, I created and I call it Ask About What Matters, is to ask, what are the risks? First of all, tell me the risks. Don't tell me the benefits. I'm going to like the benefits. Tell me the risks. Right off the bat, I need to know. Tell me the benefits and tell me the alternatives. Because as a doctor, sometimes you don't want to offer the alternatives. Remember I said A, B, and C, and the doctor's going to make a lot of money off of C? What are the alternatives? The doctor may not want to volunteer this information, but if you ask them flat out, they're not going to lie. Withholding information is very different from lying, and people don't want to lie. Also, there's liability associated with lying. They might say, you can do A. I also recommend B. An alternative to C would be just to wait. Come back in 6 months and we'll see what's happening. That's an alternative. Now, had you not asked about it, they would not have told you. And that's another part of being a consumer, not just demanding, but also probing and making sure that whatever you're offered is really the best for you and that you've become acquainted with all of the alternatives. That's incredibly important. and not trivial. I want to add something here. At a bar, at a cafe, we're not shy. I mean, you're not afraid of walking out to of asking the waitress and say, oh, this coffee is a bit weak. Could I get another shot of espresso?
Right.
That's fine. You're not like, oh my God, I don't want to offend the barista. I'm going to hurt their emotions, their feelings, and will they make coffee for me next time? It's ridiculous. You don't have these thoughts. I hope. You shouldn't.
Right.
But with a doctor, we defer to doctors, and that's good. We respect their authority. That's also good. But we are stewards of our own health. We have to remember that. And the reason why I'm encouraging people to really almost practice the set of questions of what are the risks, what are the benefits, what are the alternatives, is like to say you're allowed to ask these questions. In fact, you should. Because guess what? It's your body, right? I call the book, Your Life Depends on It. It does.
Right.
It's your life. It's your body. So as a consumer, you need to be able to ask and to find out that you're really being offered the best treatment possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a lot of great points, I think, and I know I want to remind the audience to ask your questions. We're live on Facebook, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, so make sure to ask your questions. This is a rare opportunity here with Dr. Talya Miron-Shatz. What I want to continue to discuss also is the healthcare quality, since that's what you are really reminding everyone to not just have access and equity to healthcare, which is probably another topic altogether, but also to the healthcare quality, right? And so there are some positive movements as well, I think, based on our healthcare payers and healthcare system that's now encouraging more value-based medicine to be reimbursed, for example, right, by physicians rather than fee-for-service. And even for pharmaceutical companies to demonstrate that their products they show direct clinical outcome benefit, patient outcomes, and only once they are able to demonstrate that evidence do they get reimbursed for those treatments. Right. So what how can the patients navigate the different providers, the different healthcare systems, and still do the best in terms of caring for their own health? Because we know that we change our insurance system, health insurance every year in the United States. Yeah. We're forced to, which forces us to change providers. I had GERD, for example, chronic GERD, esophageal reflux disease. That we thought was an ulcer. I was treating for it, but then I had knee problems. I went to another doctor. He didn't really go over the medication review, and he gave me naproxen. If had I not been a pharmacist, I wouldn't have questioned that choice, or I wouldn't have asked for that alternative. So that's just an example of transitioning from one provider to another, those medical records being lost in the system. And so do you address that in the book, or what are your approaches to any suggestions for how patients can navigate these complexities?
Yes, many suggestions. Okay. Let's start with your last example. So what I realized as I was writing, I thought I would be writing about patients. I realized I'm paid. I'm also writing about doctors. Doctors are human. Did you know that? They are. And every thought, difficulty, challenge, flaw that normal people like you and I have, physicians have as well. And the example you're describing with conflicting medication, it shouldn't happen, but it does. So why does it happen? Because your doctor is focusing on your knee. He doesn't, the rest of it is like, whatever, it's noise, it's fluff. Right. He's a knee doctor. Don't confuse me now with your other issues that you may not know anything about. Right. So what we need is a system, really. And there are such systems, a computerized system that would say you're prescribing something. Here's what this person's already taken. There's a conflict. Beep, 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 beep. Like there's a super annoying sound like a truck backing off that the doctor wouldn't be able to ignore. And basically what I'm saying, and I'm proposing that, and I have an amazing example with a nudge. So I'm sure you know what a nudge is, but I want to say what it is just for the benefit of people who may not know. A nudge is a very gentle probe. It's like, gently, ever so gently, guiding someone in the right direction. And if they don't want to go in the right direction, they don't have to. But you're guiding them in the right direction. And there are nudges for physicians. And the most striking nudge I'd ever heard of is by the British Nudge Unit. And what they did is they realized that patients who were ventilated, that was before COVID, when they're ventilated, they might develop pneumonia. And if you use mouthwash on them, they're a lot less likely to develop pneumonia. So it's a bit similar to your example because, you think about a ventilated patient. Do you really think about mouthwash? Most of them did not think about mouthwash. So what happened with the Nudge Unit is they created a form, a standardized form for ventilated patients, and the mouthwash was already checked in. And that's great. So the doctor doesn't have to think. You might say, come on, you're insulting doctors. They're smart people. They're trained to think. And that's true. That's very, very true, but also very busy. So if very busy people have a hard time just processing all the information, like those ventilated patients with the mouthwash, or like your knee doctor who was not minding the other medication you were receiving, they need help. And that's why I think there's a whole other layer. So I started writing takeaways for patients. Then I thought, wait a minute, hello, they're sitting with an expert. I have to write takeaways for experts. There is so much information that doctors need to process and acknowledge, and so much they need to change actually in how they're addressing their patients, not because I say so, because patients' health is at stake. It's going to increase patient satisfaction. It's going to increase the rapport with patients. It's going to increase patient health. It's really a win-win. And then another aha moment came when I thought, they're not alone. The doctors are working in organizations. And you mentioned, my master's, before I went on to do a PhD in social psychology, my master's was in organizational psychology. And people work within an organization. The amount of time a doctor spends with a patient is determined by their organization. The way they convey information, likewise, determined by their organization. So, nudges are not determined by the doctor. The doctor doesn't create that system that says there are conflicting medications here. And you're a doctor of pharmacology, so you know best about this type of issues. There needs to be someone in the healthcare system to help doctors make the right decisions, make the right choices. The proportion of patients who received mouthwash, once this was in the form, went up to 90%. Yeah. Amazing. And right. The most striking thing is they're ventilated. They can't talk, they can't do anything. They're completely helpless.
Yeah.
And you can really help them by programming a form. Now, how amazing is that? It takes medical knowledge and it takes human knowledge. It takes psychological knowledge to understand how doctors are thinking. And before I said, talk to people like they're fifth graders. And it's like, come on. So, but it's also talk to doctors and create systems for doctors that take into account they're being incredibly busy individuals. If you do that, you're doing good. I mean, years ago, I was part of New York's really, really amazing group of Health 2.0, and I was in charge of the Pharma 2.0 series. So I would do meetups, we would have meetings, and startup companies would present. And whenever a startup company would say, we have a great solution, and oftentimes it was a great solution, and just doctors will learn how to use it, I would be like, oh my God, that's not going to happen. And for the most part, it doesn't happen. It just doesn't. You have to streamline. You have to extremely streamline everything for doctors and for patients, basically for everyone. This is what digital health does when it's good, by the way, if you want to talk or ask about that, because that's really an important issue.
You read my mind, Talya. That was you're a consultant, and I know you've consulted for many technology giants, NetMobile, Hilarium, I believe, and so I'm very curious
Samsung.
about. Sorry,
Samsung,
right? Okay, Samsung. Yeah. So I'm curious about your opinion on how we can integrate AI, machine learning, and technology in order to reduce medical errors, medication errors. in this sea of information that we are exposed to, all of us, physicians, pharmacists, patients
Mm-hmm.
alike. What is your stance, or any suggestions, anything that any variables we need to be careful about, maybe,
Right.
or
So,
yeah.
so my standpoint is always comes from my training. I have a PhD in psychology. I'm a behavioral economist. What I think about always is how do we simplify? How do we streamline? How do we present data? How do we not inundate people with data? Because it's very tempting. You have so much information, and you end up looking at an Excel sheet, and you go dizzy. Not because you're not smart enough to understand it, because it's really confusing and it takes a certain amount of effort. So first of all, just streamline that information. Ideally, to add an emotional component, and that's something I did with Hilarion. It was, oh my God, it was such a long time. It was a really nice company, and they built a dashboard for people to take care of their own health. And it integrated a number of measures, as we would do now. Likewise, they had colors. They had the red for you're not doing great, the orange, and the green. So you have to explain what this all means every time in very simple terms. You have to add an emotional component. And I think what's crucial, is you have to explain what's the next step, what to do. So just information without an action item doesn't really help. I want to give you an example. But you know what? If you want to talk or take questions for a minute, I'm going to get myself something to drink before I cough myself to death.
No problem. Sure.
Thank you. 1 minute.
I'm gonna. I think simplifying the information is so critical. I agree with Talya. Because there's lots of information, and not all of it is cataloged. If you are a patient, a healthcare consumer, and you search particular hashtags online, for example, right? There are particular formats or particular platforms in which you may be able to find information better than in others. For example, YouTube. In YouTube, you can virtually find any medical information. There are academic institutions that have their own dedicated healthcare channels, and that have demonstrated evidence that has shown clinical improvement in learning anatomy, human anatomy channel for medical college students, or others in patients who are in surgery, various surgical procedures in GI, catheterizations that are taught, virtually. Yet there are others that are journal clubs, that are asynchronous forms of education that take place over time via tutorials, for example, that may be scattered. They may be scattered all over, different hashtags, and they may not be as easy to search, to find. And so I think that when used correctly, I agree with you, Talia, that artificial intelligence and machine learning can not only bring attract our attention to a particular information, whether it's medical and whether it's relevant to us or not, but it can increase the context. It can draw of that information and what that may mean in terms of that decision. And to decrease bias ultimately, because that's the value that I see in integrating artificial intelligence or machine learning. How can you organize more data, more unstructured information that's everywhere, that's scattered, filter it quickly, more rapidly, so that you can then base your decisions on much more evidence that, and that there I think only in that kind of construct does your healthcare decision, become more evidence-based and less biased. Whether or not it's successful, I don't, but
I think that's incredibly true for physicians. Absolutely. There are many papers, there's a lot of research on physician choices, and sometimes I have a colleague who actually found that when doctors don't have time, that's when they look at the EHR. That's when they base their decisions on data, because otherwise they say, oh, let me order tests. Let me do this and this and that, instead of looking at the entire picture. I did a book launch last week. I had a great webinar, and one of the guests there, actually she was in the audience, but she chimed in because she's so brilliant. She really is Dr. Michal Rosentzvey, and she is head of healthcare research at IBM Research. Mm-hmm. Brilliant woman. We spoke about what AI can do. So we spoke about fall detection and things that you can do with caregiving, and you can just sort of accumulate all kinds of cues and information and figure out what that person you're caregiving for is doing and how they're doing. And that's really great. But something that, and with other, with Fitbits and every type of information gathering that can be. But what she acknowledged, and that's very obvious to me, and that's, almost funny, it being 2021 with so much computational power, but maybe not really funny at all, is that they're not doing really great in terms of acknowledging behavioral data. So they know what your heart rate is. That's great. And then they know your blood pressure and how many calories you consume today, and, all of these measurable things. They're less good at accumulating data about your behavior. What have you been doing? How have you been engaged? What were you thinking about? What were you eating? Were you watching TV? Were you working? What were you doing? Were you enjoying yourself or being aggravated? All that type of information we don't really know. And a lot of behaviors and health behaviors are just not captured in the data. So much as we're enamored with technology, we also need to realize that it has its own limitations. And with doctors sometimes need to realize that they have their own limitations, like that knee doctor who saw you and just ignored your meds. Had there been an AI system to beat for him, you would have benefited. It's frightening. It's really frightening to think about this medical error. It's an oversight, just ignoring. So it's almost like, I spoke about the confirmation bias, and we'd like to listen to things that just confirm what we already think. That doctor said, this man has a knee problem. This is what he needs. That's it. What am I going to do now? Look for conflicting evidence? Why would I do that?
Yeah.
No reason, right? Other than to save your health.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a multidisciplinary healthcare team, really, that takes part in those decisions. And that's what your comments make me think about. And I know that this is a term that we've been using in medicine for many years, but not always do we still apply it or consider our partners, healthcare partners, in those decisions. In fact, when I started my career in the pharma industry, I had led a multidisciplinary team to analyze over 2,000 medication errors and their sequelae, which I had told you about. So that's one of the reasons why patient safety and reducing medication errors is one of the reasons why I feel like I'm compelled to do what I'm doing in my industry right now. So thank you very much, Talya. I want to wrap up our discussion and just ask you really what you'd like, what you see as some of the biggest lesson from this book for those who will read it, because I think that what I'm taking away from a lot of your discussions, having read the book and talked about it with you in detail, that I think a lot of us need to make more effort in our decisions, and there's a lot of room for making more effort. And you provide many episodes like that in the book, and you've shared them with me. So let everyone know why they should read your book and what what is, let's say, a lesson that you'd like them to.
Absolutely. So there. I'm just going to hold it and talk about it. You know why you should read it? Because you should really care about your health, and because you're making health choices all the time. And I'm not just talking about vaccinating, it's about whether or not you floss, and it's about whether or not you take your medication, or you say, come on, I don't feel it's doing anything for me. And then you just don't take it. And then guess what? Something unpleasant that you never wanted to happen happens. So the truth is, we all deal with our health. We all make health choices all the time, whether we like it or not, and we need tools. It's not rocket science. It's not incredibly complicated, but it's something that you need to have in your arsenal, and you need to have it in your arsenal for you, for your kids, because you're in charge of their healthcare decisions and state, for your loved ones if you care for them. And I want people to know that thinking about your medical decisions is not a sick people thing. It's not a patient thing. It's not a bummer thing. It's not like, oh, okay, I'll cut you a deal. I'll buy your book, but I'm not going to read it because I'm not sick. No, don't be dumb like that. Like, think about it as, I need it. I need to, we're so in love with hacking. We're so in love with hacks and tricks. And think about this as a way of hacking your healthcare, as a way of hacking your health, as a way of going into the doctor's office next time, feeling stronger, feeling bigger, feeling more empowered, actually having tools to deal with it. Don't be like those patients who walk in and say, I want A, B, and C, not even knowing that C might be redundant and B might hurt them. What's the point? And the doctor is going to say yes because the doctor doesn't want to fight with you, or they're going to make a buck off of whatever you're asking for them. So really be smart. You want to be smart about your medical choices? Do yourself a favor. Like, read my book. Get involved with it. Be able to hack your health. I think that's incredibly smart. We know so much about Kate Middleton's dresses, and she's beautiful, and she wears beautiful dresses. Right. But to be honest, that's not going to help you next time you have to deal with something with your eye or your knee or anything. So get smart about making health choices. And thank you so much for asking.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Talya. It's a pleasure. Again, have a great rest of the week. And I look forward to speaking to you soon. Contact Talya, Miron-Shatz, everyone, and get her book.
Yes. So let me just give you my email address for people who are interested.
Oh, sure.
My website. So my name is Talya Miron-Shatz. You see it on the screen. It's Talya with a Y, Miron-Shatz, Mironshhatz, and that's the email as well, talyamiron-shatz@gmail.com, and that's also the Twitter handle. And the book is called Your Life Depends on It, How to Make Better Choices About Your Health. It was published by Basic Books, available wherever books are sold. Exactly. Right. Fantastic.
That's the email you can contact Talya.
Yes, and it's the same, and the name is my Twitter handle, and I'm also on LinkedIn. And I would love to hear from you. Would love to hear. Mostly, what I would love to hear is I want to hear people saying, I read your book, and it really helped me. That's why I wrote the book. I didn't write it to be on some bestseller list. I wrote it so that someone would come up to me and say, "You saved me. You helped me. I was going to have prostate surgery, but then I asked what are the alternatives, and the surgeon said, watchful waiting." And I was like, hey, I like watchful waiting. I like that better than having my prostate taken out with all the possible complications. So thank you, Talya with a Y, for saying that. And thank you, Tim, so much for having me.